Well, hello everyone. Today I'd like to share with you something that I really enjoy to talk about, and it's one of my favorite themes throughout the Bible, and it's something that we're going to talk about on Sunday morning, and it's Yahweh's sovereign agenda to bring about the Messiah. And why is this important? Well, because it's one of the very first promises that we see in the Bible in Genesis 3:15. And it says there, this is God speaking to the serpent. He says, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. And then he will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." So that he is very significant right there. It's talking about a specific person who would come and then crush the serpent's head. And we know what happened at the fall. We know that this was sin coming into the world, and that sin required redemption on the part or to come from somebody else, and that person is Jesus Christ. And this is the first prophecy that we really see in the Bible concerning this person. And we also see this promise is continually fulfilled throughout the Old Testament, and that's what we'll be talking about. We see in Genesis chapter 15 verse 4, God says to Abraham, he says, "This man will not be your heir," speaking of Eliezer, because Abraham was wondering, is my servant going to be my heir, or am I actually going to have a son? And then God says, "But a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." And then he took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." So we see that promise in Genesis 3:15 is being fulfilled in the covenant to Abraham. And then it doesn't even stop there. We see that it goes from the covenant to Abraham to a promise to David that he would have an everlasting dynasty. And we see that in 2 Samuel 7 in verse 16, where he says to David, "Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." So we see a promised seed in Genesis 3:15. And then in Genesis 15 we see the promise to Abraham that his offspring will be like the stars in the sky. And then we see this promise to David that he'll have an everlasting dynasty, and that dynasty would be fulfilled by somebody in his line named Jesus Christ. And we see that later on. That's why Matthew, at the very beginning of his gospel, says this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David. Because Matthew wanted us to understand, and all of the readers to understand, that this promise that God has begun from the very beginning and that has been unfolding throughout the scriptures is being fulfilled in the man Jesus Christ. And even despite all of the opposition to it, Herod tried to exterminate Jesus Christ, the true Messiah, and failed in chapter 2. And even before that, we see in 2 Kings that Athaliah, a very evil queen of Judah who was not of the Davidic line but tried to wipe out the Davidic line, and the boy king Joash survived. So even despite all of human opposition, God's promise in Genesis 3:15 will be fulfilled. And then Philippians 2:10 says, "At the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth." So we see that man, that he will come, that was mentioned in Genesis 3:15, and will crush the serpent's head. And why is that significant? Because we can't have any hope without that man, Jesus Christ. We can't have any hope without the Messiah. And I truly believe that the whole entirety of the scriptures points to one man. There's not only one man mentioned in the Bible, of course, but I believe that all of the events that take place are pointing forward to something greater, and that something greater is Jesus Christ, and he's that fulfillment. And he's the reason we can have hope, because he crushed the serpent's head. And this is really about God's plan in redemptive history, and that the sovereign plan of Yahweh to bring about the Messiah will be accomplished despite all human opposition to it.